Hey guys, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite Size Book of Mormon. I'm glad to have you with me. So, if you've never been here before, this is just a podcast where I read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon each episode, and I give a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, a little bit of jokes. So, yeah, it's a good time. Stick around. So, if you remember last episode, we read 2 Nephi chapter 7, and it is just a chapter where Jacob quotes Isaiah. And it's a pretty short chapter, but it's really cool because it talks about how Christ is powerful and how Christ is there to save us and to support us and to be there for us, and he is learned and he cannot be confounded, and oh my goodness, it's a good time. So yeah, go back and listen to that. This chapter, much like the last chapter, is just going to be another direct quote from Isaiah. There's not going to be any commentary from Jacob until next chapter. So this chapter is just more Isaiah, so buckle up. It's pretty exciting. So yeah, I think without any further ado, we read 2 Nephi chapter 8. Hearken unto me, ye that follow after righteousness. Look unto the rock from whence ye are hewn, and to the hole of the pit from whence ye are digged. Look unto Abraham your father, and unto Sarah, she that bare you, for I called him alone, and blessed him. For the Lord shall comfort Zion, he will comfort all her waste places, and he will make her wilderness like Eden, and her desert like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness shall be found therein, thanksgiving and the voice of melody. That's a beautiful wording, like the voice of melody, thanksgiving. The Lord will comfort Zion, and the desert will become the garden of the Lord. That's really beautiful wording. So the first chunk of this chapter, which is like 16 verses, is talking about Zion and talking about basically New Jerusalem, the Jerusalem in the Americas with the Nephites and the Lamanites. And I think when we're reading this part that's all kind of about Zion, remember that it applies to us, because we are tasked in this modern day to help build Zion. And Zion is not really a place, but it is a people, and it is a feeling, and it is righteousness, and joy, and love, and unity. And I think that if you remember that, then it will be easier for you to understand this section. That's not a promise, but it might help. Who knows? Just keep in mind that when God, or when Isaiah messianically speaks through, the Messiah's voice, that it's talking about us. It's talking about Zion. It's talking about the ideal. It's talking about God's people in the Americas. And yeah, so just keep that in mind. Hearken unto me, my people, and give ear unto me, O my nation, for a law shall proceed from me, and I will make my judgment to rest for a light for the people. My righteousness is near, my salvation is gone forth, and mine arm shall judge the people. The isles shall wait upon me, and on mine arm shall they trust. So I read something that said that the isles refer to the Americas, and it is mentioned several times earlier and later in the Book of Mormon that the Nephites and Lamanites, they refer to themselves as living on an isle of the sea. And so when it says, the isle shall wait upon me, and by me, Isaiah is speaking messianically, so it's the Lord, that it's the Americas. Like, the people in the Americas are waiting for him. And it's interesting that it specifies the Americas, because you could argue that the people in Old Jerusalem, the people in the, land of Judea back home, weren't waiting for him. In the same way, at least, that the people in the Americas were. Lift up your eyes to the heavens, and look upon the earth beneath, for the heavens shall vanish away like smoke, and the earth shall wax old like a garment, and they that dwell therein shall die in like manner. But my salvation shall be forever, and my righteousness shall not be abolished. I can't remember where I heard this, but I heard this from somewhere that was talking about eternal life, and what it is, and like what it means. And when we think of eternal, we think of forever. We think of, never ending. But eternal, I think, more means the potential to be forever, that it will never fade away. Not necessarily that it is forever, but that it could be, Now here it's talking about how the earth and the heavens will vanish away. They'll get old like a garment. They'll vanish away like smoke, all that kind of wording. And then he says, but my salvation shall be forever. So this time he uses the word forever, which, we know means never ending, like actually never ending, instead of just eternal, which means, I think, a little bit more the potential for eternity, rather than actual eternity like we understand it. It's interesting how this verse says everything is temporary. The earth and the heavens, it'll all pass away, but his salvation is forever. His righteousness shall not be abolished. So his righteousness and his salvation are the only things that will last. The only things that are truly, truly eternal. That's pretty cool. Hearken unto me, ye that know righteousness, the people in whose heart I have written my law. Fear ye not the reproach of men, neither be ye afraid of their revilings. For the moth shall eat them up like a garment, and the worm shall eat them like wool, but my righteousness shall be forever, and my salvation from generation to generation. So again, the same wording. Like, the people that revile you, the people that reproach you, they will, be eaten up like a moth eats a garment. Like, they are not forever. They're temporary. They are not that important in the grand scheme of things. But our righteousness and our salvation is. And so I think Isaiah here is trying to explain to us what our priority should be. And again, that's just my interpretation. But I think he's being like, don't be afraid of people that might hate you, because they're temporary. But your righteousness and your salvation is what should be your priority. Awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord. Awake as in the ancient days. Art thou not he that hath cut Rahab and wounded the dragon? Art thou not he who hath dried the sea, the waters of the great deep, that hath made the depths of the sea a way for the ransomed to pass over? Therefore, the redeemed of the Lord shall return, and come with singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy and holiness shall be upon their heads, and they shall obtain gladness and joy, sorrow and mourning shall flee away. I am he, yea, I am he that comforteth you. Behold, who art thou, that thou shouldst be afraid of man, who shall die, and of the Son of Man, who shall be made like unto grass? And forgettest the Lord thy Maker, that hath stretched forth the heavens, and laid the foundations of the earth, and has feared continually every day because of the fury of the oppressor, as if he were ready to destroy? And where is the fury of the oppressor? The captive exile hasteneth that he may be loosed, and that he should not die in the pit, nor that his bread should fail. But I am the Lord thy God, whose waves roared, the Lord of hosts is my name. And I have put my words in thy mouth, and have covered thee in the shadow of mine hand, that I may plant the heavens, and lay the foundations of the earth, and say unto Zion, Behold, thou art my people. So thus ends the section talking about Zion. Isn't that cool? Isn't it helpful to kind of think about that section as we are Zion? Like, we are the people that God is trying to support and trying to love and trying to get through to. And it says so many times, again, this is Isaiah speaking messianically, I am he that comforteth you. It is my word that will save you. My salvation shall last forever. Like, it's really pointing us towards the Lord. And because it's pointing us towards Jesus, it's pointing us to God. Because Jesus points to God. As, that's kind of his entire job. And so it's really cool how, this entire section is just Isaiah telling us, focus on God. That is what really matters. Your other priorities, like the people that might hate you, that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. What really matters is righteousness and salvation. If our own salvation matters, then why shouldn't the salvation of others matter? And therefore, missionary work, right? So, anyways, this is a really cool section of the chapter that's kind of the Lord speaking to us and to the people in the Americas at this time and telling us to set our priorities straight. And that's pretty awesome. So going forward from this section, it's mostly going to be talking about Old Jerusalem and telling them what to do. And like I said, that doesn't apply to us as directly, but we can still learn a lot from it, so pay attention. Awake, awake, stand up, O Jerusalem, which hast drunk at the hand of the Lord the cup of his fury. Thou hast drunken the dregs of the cup of trembling wrung out. And none to guide her among all the sons she hath brought forth, neither that taketh her by the hand of all the sons she hath brought up. These 2 sons are come unto thee, who shall be sorry for thee, thy desolation and destruction, and the famine and the sword, and by whom shall I comfort thee? Thy sons have fainted, save these 2. They lie at the head of all the streets, as a wild bull in a net. They are full of the fury of the Lord, and the rebuke of thy God. So you know what's interesting about this section? It repeats a couple of times, 2 sons. In the beginning of verse 19 it says, these 2 sons come unto thee. In the beginning of verse 20 it says, thy sons have fainted, save these 2. So what does Isaiah mean when he's talking about 2 sons? And I read somewhere that during the history of Israel, during the history of Jerusalem, when Jerusalem is under siege, so one of the points that they're, under siege, I'm pretty sure from people from Babylon, there are going to be 2 prophets that will prophesy in the city. And this is actually told in the book of Revelation. So if you want to go read it, Revelations 11, 2 through 12 kind of tells the story of these 2 prophets that will prophesy in the city of Jerusalem while it's under siege. And so that's what these verses are referencing. Isn't that kind of awesome? How interconnected all the scriptures are. Even though this is in the Book of Mormon, being quoted by a Book of Mormon prophet, it is originally from the Bible, which is quoting, or at least referencing, something else in the Bible. It's all interconnected. It's so interesting how deep this rabbit hole goes of prophets quoting other, different teachings from different people from different time periods in different places. That's what I love about scripture. It's so interesting to see different prophets and different prophecies and different people kind of engage each other and to talk about each other's ideas. And that doesn't happen too much, but it does happen at least a few times in the Book of Mormon where it's pretty cool, where you can see prophets, or the very least preachers, are quoting other prophets and other prophecies to teach to their people in a different context. So, I don't know, it's pretty cool, that like interconnectedness, you know? Therefore, hear now this, thou afflicted and drunken, and not with wine. Thus saith thy Lord, the Lord and thy God pleadeth the cause of his people. Behold, I have taken out of thine hand the cup of trembling, the dregs of the cup of my fury. Thou shalt no more drink it again. But I will put it into the hand of them that afflict thee, who have said to thy soul, Bow down, that we may go over. And thou hast laid thy body as the ground, and as the street to them that went over. Awake, awake, put on thy strength, O Zion. Put on thy beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, the holy city. For henceforth there shall be no more come into thee, the uncircumcised and the unclean. Shake thyself from the dust. Arise, sit down, O Jerusalem. Loose thyself from the bands of thy neck, O captive daughter of Zion. So, pretty cool chapter. So those last two verses, starting with awake, awake, put on thy strength, those last two verses are actually from the next chapter of Isaiah. So this chapter quotes Isaiah 51 and 52 verses 1 and 2. So therefore those last two verses are kind of separate. Like they're still Isaiah, they're still adjacent to the other scriptures we read, but they are in the next chapter. And so I think that makes them a little bit more separate. And so I think we can interpret them a little bit separately, you know what I'm saying? I think these last two verses are basically just a call from Isaiah to awake, awake. Not only to Jerusalem, but to Zion. Because literally the first chunk of verse 24 says, Awake, awake, put on thy strength, O Zion. Put on thy beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, the holy city. He's talking to both. Like this whole chapter has been talking about Zion and then Jerusalem, but these last two verses are kind of a wrap up to be like, hey, both Zion and Jerusalem should look to God, should focus on righteousness, to awake, awake. So yeah, pretty cool. So overall, very awesome chapter. I very much enjoyed it. Isaiah is pretty difficult for me, so I actually did do some reading before recording this, which I don't usually do. But yeah, like that really increased my understanding, and it gave me a framework with which I could read this chapter and have a deeper understanding. And so I'd highly suggest that you find some resources of your own to interpret this Isaiah a little bit better. And that's not to say my interpretation is perfect, nor is it complete, but I think that it was pretty good. I especially connected with the first section of the chapter, as I'm sure you're surprised, how Isaiah is telling us to kind of get our priorities in order and telling us what's really important, and I think that's really cool, because that is a reminder that I still resonate with today. So the standout verse for this chapter is going to be verse 12, and to remind you it says, I am he, yea, I am he that comforteth you. Behold, who art thou, that thou shouldst be afraid of man, who should die, and of the Son of Man, who should be made like unto grass? So that kind of is a good representation of what the first section of the chapter is saying. As I've already mentioned and explained into the ground, Isaiah here is kind of explaining to us what really matters. He's talking about how Jesus is the one that's comforting us, and we have him on our side. And with the last chapter that we just read, explaining how powerful Jesus is and how he cannot be confounded and how he has the voice of the learned, etc., etc., how can we be afraid if he's the one that's comforting us, really? And also the second half is like, why should you be afraid of man? They're gonna die. They're temporary. They're gonna be made like unto grass. They're gonna, wither away like the moth-eaten garment, Like, it's interesting the wording that he uses to kind of explain and to get across how temporary everything is to God, and how we, with an internal perspective, can also see that same thing. I think it's just important to, take a moment and truly reflect on what our priorities are. And if they're out of order, then focus on reordering them. See if you can make some changes in your life to focus on him more and worry about others less. That's not to say that you should not serve people, that you should not look to other people, but the point is you should not worry about what they're saying and let their words take priority over your relationship with God. You should not let yourself be swayed by the words of others. You should focus on your personal relationship with God. And part of that personal relationship is serving others. So I'm not saying that you should ignore the people, or that you should, become isolated, or that you should hide from others and just focus on praying or whatever. Don't become a nun, please. That would be sad. But Isaiah here is encouraging us to have an eternal perspective and to focus on our relationship with him and his salvation and our righteousness. And his righteousness. In fact, the scripture says his righteousness is the one that is eternal. And I think that means that his righteousness is something that we can rely on. That he will always make the right choice because he is eternally righteous. So, anyways, yeah, such a cool chapter. I really enjoyed it. And I'm glad that I was able to take something new from it that I hadn't really noticed before. And I hope that you did as well. So yeah, I think that's the episode for today. Thank you so much for listening. I'm glad to have you with me. And in the episode notes, there's, as always, those links, one of which is a link to a free web version of the Book of Mormon, and there are 2 app downloads that also have, fun fact, a free version of the Book of Mormon on them. So yeah, if you don't have your own copy, you can find one there. I highly recommend you read along, as, with this chapter, I can only do so much interpreting, so I want to see what you learned from this chapter. There's so much more to understand with Isaiah. There's so much deeper that you can go, I feel like. And so yeah, I hope that you take a little bit of initiative and read a little bit of yourself and try and understand and try and take something new from it, because I feel like Isaiah is unique in that you can always learn something new because it's so much more interpretable than maybe other parts of the Book of Mormon. So yeah, again, thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.